Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so that record-breaking SpaceX IPO that just dropped, it has sent absolute shockwaves through the entire financial world. Today, we're going to unpack exactly what happened and uncover why this giant is no longer just a rocket company. Let's dive in. If you ask anyone on the street what SpaceX actually does, they'll probably say, oh, they build rockets to send humans to Mars. And hey, that's true. But that public perception, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you don't just hit a $2.1 trillion valuation based on a futuristic Mars goal alone. Something massive is happening right now, today, to justify that crazy number. To really wrap our heads around the scale of what's happening, we have to look at the market debut itself. The stock priced on Friday at $135 a share, but it definitely didn't stay there for long. By the time the closing bell rang, it had shot up an incredible 20% to close at $161. So what drove this? Well, we saw some massive churn in the market. A lot of institutions, especially hedge funds that got early shares, decided to sell them off. But waiting right there to sweep up all that massive volume was immense retail demand, plus these long-term enterprise holders who just wanted to lock this stock away in the vault. And to understand the absolute frenzy of this debut, we kind of need to look at history. For years, the Saudi Aramco IPO back in 2019 held the crown for the largest capital raise ever, at roughly $29 billion. Well, SpaceX just raised $86 billion. They dwarfed the all-time record by nearly 3 times. The volume of stock traded in dollar terms was literally the biggest of a single counter being sold in the history of public exchanges. It's completely unprecedented. Which brings us to this historic milestone. 16 years ago, Elon Musk rang the bell at NASDAQ for Tesla. Today, both of his companies sit squarely in the top 10 most valuable companies on Earth. Tesla is the 10th largest at $1.46 trillion, and SpaceX instantly jumped to number 7 at $2.1 trillion. But again, you gotta ask yourself, how did a private aerospace company suddenly rocket up to become the 7th most valuable entity on the planet? Section 1. The hidden AI cloud. To really understand this valuation, we actually have to look away from the stars for a second and look right here on Earth. Take this staggering quote from early SpaceX investor and data center expert Gavin Baker. He noted that just a month ago, SpaceX essentially did not have a public-facing cloud computing business. But now, by some measures, it's already the 4th largest cloud provider out there, sitting ahead of legacy tech giants like Oracle. They pulled off this stealthy takeover of the terrestrial AI computing space in literally a matter of weeks. When you think of the top cloud providers, you naturally expect to see Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, right? But sitting right there at number 4 is SpaceX. In this incredibly capital-efficient move, they basically bypassed decades-old computing giants almost overnight. A lot of investors are just now realizing that before SpaceX relies purely on space-based orbital data centers, they're quietly positioning themselves to be the largest terrestrial supplier of AI compute in the world. So how exactly are they moving this fast? Well, they're executing this masterful, rapid-fire 3-step playbook. First, they secure top-tier AI GPUs from NVIDIA. We're talking the massive Colossus 2 chips. Second, they build these cutting-edge data centers primarily for their own internal use, feeding power to AI models like Grok and Cursor. But here is the absolute genius part, step 3. Because they have the world-class engineering chops to build cheaper and faster, they take whatever immense leftover compute capacity they have, and they just rent it directly to the market. They're monetizing gigawatts of terrestrial compute at a very high rate, basically making money coming and going. Section 2. Unlocking a $1.6 trillion market. But, terrestrial compute is really only half of the hidden iceberg here. We have to talk about their satellite network. Kathy Wood over at ARK Invest just went into the open market and bought $500 million worth of SpaceX stock on debut day. Why such a massive bet? Well, 5 years ago, analysts estimated Starlink's total addressable market at about $34 billion. They figured it was basically just for rural internet and, maybe boats. Today, SpaceX puts that market at $1.6 trillion. They realize Starlink isn't just rural internet anymore, it's a direct takeover of all global telecommunications. So how do you suddenly unlock a market that massive? It's simple. You crash the cost. In the past, the hardware required to connect to a satellite network, specifically a phased array antenna, cost upwards of $27,000. That's a huge barrier. SpaceX eliminated those friction points by engineering their own phased array antennas entirely in-house. By dropping consumer costs so dramatically, they suddenly unlocked global markets that previously seemed flat out impossible to reach. And this cost crushing, it's happening right now down in Bastrop, Texas. People are calling it the Bastrop miracle. They've built this fully automated lights-out mega factory, meaning you can literally turn off the lights and the machines just keep running. Raw materials go in one end and finished phased array antennas come out the other. There is virtually zero human foot traffic, no humans required, which I guess saves on the electricity bill. And the wildest part? That gigantic factory is going to end up being the smallest of 4 they're building on that site as they expand to manufacture data satellites.
Section 3. The unbeatable space moat.
With this massive rollout of infrastructure, you might be asking, who is actually going to challenge them? Who can compete with this dominant network? Now, it's easy to find critics out there who just focus on test rockets exploding, but let's look at the actual data for a second. Blue Origin, backed by Jeff Bezos, is currently estimated to be about 9 years behind SpaceX in reusable rocket tech. And China? Despite a massive state-backed space program, they have exactly 0 returned boosters to planet Earth. Everyone else is basically a decade behind. In the business world, we call this a moat. It's a distinct, sustainable competitive advantage that protects a company's market share from rivals. And SpaceX has engineered an absolutely unprecedented moat. While their competitors are just trying to figure out how to get a single booster back, SpaceX is already deploying larger, 100% reusable starships designed to launch entire orbital compute networks into the sky. Their lead in engineering and manufacturing renders them effectively untouchable in this wide-open space. This absolute dominance is exactly why Oppenheimer just initiated coverage on the stock with an outperform reading. They set a $190 price target, which would push the company's valuation to a staggering $2.5 trillion. As they clearly state in their report, they believe SpaceX is going to leverage this terrestrial compute expertise and their space technologies to become the single largest communications, cloud, and AI company in the world.
Section 4. Navigating extreme market volatility.
Okay, before we wrap up, we have to ground all these astronomical projections with a quick reality check regarding the stock itself. With options trading opening up and the hype cycle at an absolute all-time high, a lot of investors are asking, is it actually safe to jump in right now? Now, this isn't financial advice, we are just imparting the facts here, but the immediate short-term reality is that the stock is set to be a highly, highly volatile battleground.
Just take it from serial entrepreneur and venture capitalist Larry Goldberg. He recently warned about the upcoming options trading, saying, the volatility right now is going to be extreme. He specifically cautioned that messing around with short-term options right now could absolutely lead to burned fingers, advising people to keep your fingers in their gloves. So anyone looking at this really needs to carefully consider their own time horizons and separate the long-term vision of the company from the very real short-term chaos of the stock market. I want to leave you with this final thought. We started this explainer by asking how a rocket company is worth $2.1 trillion. If SpaceX truly locks in total command of off-world logistics with Starship while simultaneously controlling the on-world digital infrastructure of AI data centers and global telecom, what are they really building? Are we witnessing the birth of the ultimate inescapable utility company for the entire future of humanity? Thanks for joining me on this explainer and keep learning.